The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
And welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast NH. I'm Deborah Monk, empowering you to find your creative voice. And today we welcome back Barb Wallace to continue our series of the 10 most common writing mistakes. Barb Wallace is my dear friend. We've been friends for a very long time. And she is the author of nearly 24 romance and mystery novels. She sold her first book in 2009 and has gone on to sell nearly 1 million books in 13 countries. Her books have been honored by the Bookseller's Best Award, the New England Reader's Choice Awards, and the Romantic Times Book Awards. So today we're going to be talking about the mistake of failing to use setting effectively. I think this is such an important discussion. I think that setting is so important. It's a character revelatory tool.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what are your thoughts on how do writers fail to use setting effectively?
Well, it's funny because I just got back editorial notes on a book, and one of the notes was that there was no sense of setting whatsoever because I would have long passages of dialogue, but I would not really set the scene. You know, in my head I knew it, but I would have her walking in the house or maybe crossing to a fireplace, but I didn't really take time. I was more interested in getting the dialogue and the story down. So, the editor wrote, where does any of this take place? I have no idea what's going on, like what's around them.
You don't want just two talking heads.
Exactly. And that happens a lot with books. I've read a lot of manuscripts where they've spent a lot of time talking and they never really get out of the chair, and you don't really feel where they are. The opposite is where someone comes in and they describe every single detail.
Back to info dumping.
Info dumping. You see, everything kind of dovetails into this. It's a lot of mistakes are repeated mistakes in different ways. But yes, they will over-describe it, and you don't need to. You only need one or two big elements.
Right.
Or you'll have the same setting all the time.
Throughout the whole book. Right. Because a lot of people, we spend our day, we live at our house, we go to our job. Jonathan is either at home or he's at Two Guys Smoke Shop, that pretty much most of the time. So a book would probably be fairly boring if it were only in those two places.
Exactly. Well, it's an interesting...
Not that I'm a very boring individual.
Well, I didn't say that.
There's that.
Well, this is an interesting story because Donald Moss, who's an agent, and he's written a lot of great books, and if any of your listeners haven't read them, they should pick up a Donald Moss book.
Yes, Maas, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he had written in one of his books, whatever you do, don't set the scene in the kitchen. Because he said kitchens are boring.
Okay.
So Jennifer Cruzy, who is a wonderful contemporary romance artist, wrote back and she said, well, you're obviously not a woman because our lives take place in the kitchen. 90% of our lives are in the kitchen. So women's fiction, if you don't have a kitchen scene, it's kind of weird because that's where we gather.
Uh-oh. Yikes.
No, but a lot of times we gather around the kitchen table.
Right.
Or you're cooking dinner. Or you're getting coffee.
Not my wife.
Yeah, and I was waiting for that.
But a lot of scenes do take place in the kitchen in women's lives. And the kitchen is a big family gathering place for a lot of places.
It's the heart of the home.
It's the heart of the home. And she said, we write about the home.
Right.
So if you're writing women's fiction or romance where it's about a family, you're going to have a kitchen. And he's like, oh, good point.
Well, there's going to be a kitchen. But I think that
that's going to get into what we're going to talk about in a little bit about point of view and characters and stuff.
Yes. I think that it's important to say that I think a lot of people think the setting is actually the place or the surrounding and the time in which a narrative takes place.
That's the actual definition. Right.
But it's so much more than that because you made a note about if you're looking at a house, if you're a real estate agent, you're going to notice one thing. And if you're a criminal planning to break into that house, you're going to notice a completely different thing.
Exactly.
And so by using the house, you can reveal a lot about your character. And I think that's where people make that mistake of they think, well, I'll just say where they are. It's so much more important than where they are.
Exactly. And
it's what they're seeing is what is important.
And sometimes the setting is, like you said, it's a character themselves or itself. If the book is about someone who has inherited a bed and breakfast, and the bed and breakfast is where she grew up and it's got family secrets, well, then that house is a character.
Right. Or a haunted house.
Or a haunted house. This... I just read this great story about this postman who delivers love letters to a tree. in real life in Germany. Well, the tree is clearly a character.
Right.
And so you're going to take care to describe certain aspects of that tree to bring it to life. You want to do that same thing with your setting. You want to pick the 3 or 4, again, like with everything else, like the whole iceberg theory.
Right.
Pick those nuggets that are going to work in that scene and reveal things.
I really think that's a really good point you've made. On many of these shows that we've done on the 10 mistakes, is pick your poison.
Yes.
And I've never really thought of it that way. Of if I had to pick only 4 or 2 of the whatever it is I'm trying to describe, I probably would know which 2 are more important. But sometimes you can get lost. So I think that a good way for us to help our listeners to fix things is say, okay, if you're going to describe the setting, take every piece of information that you did to describe the setting and narrow it down to the most important ones.
Right, and be sensory in it. If they walk into a coffee shop, they don't necessarily need to know where the tables are. Maybe they just need to know, or what color the walls are. Maybe it's a brightly colored walls and the smell of roasted coffee beans.
Right.
That were, or the bad smell. The smell of death.
In a coffee store?
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Well, I could see you putting that in a book.
Yeah. But you want to know what the character sees, hears, smells, because without that sensory, it can be happening anywhere.
Right. And what your character would notice is so important. So,
which goes back to knowing your character.
Yes.
And all of it's about point of view.
Right.
Point of view is so is an important part of your book, period. And, how you're using that camera lens about zeroing in versus zeroing out. The more this is where point of view really comes in for nailing the setting. Because you would say something like, it's not just the pot on the stove. It's the battered cast iron pan that Grandma made bacon in.
Right.
Well, that tells you way more about the setting and the person.
Right.
And again, like I said, you said earlier, how a criminal sees it and how a real estate agent will see it.
Right. Curb appeal versus the little sign that says they're protected.
Exactly.
So I did a little exercise here. Mm-hmm. So let's say we're going to set the scene starting in a therapist's office, and I'm going to give you some details about the office, and we're going to say they're important. There are 2 chairs. There's a desk filled with piles of paper. There are diplomas on the wall, and the walls are blue. Now, does it seem like any of that matters?
Smells of leather-bound books and rich mahogany.
But who would notice? Well, all right. So
maybe it smells of cigarettes from nervous patients.
Could. And that would also give you a timing because nowadays you can't smoke.
And I will go to what it depends on what your character.
Well, no, don't worry. I've got some characters here. So let's say Peggy. So those are the examples. Those are the details that are in the office that we know are facts. So Peggy, who is there because her youngest child has just gone to college and is suffering from empty nest loneliness, might notice the diplomas on the wall is from Brown University, where she herself graduated from 40 years ago, with a minor in psychology just like this therapist. She feels like she's looking in the mirror of who she would have been if she hadn't met Jim.
There you go.
So see, the diplomas matters to her, and that gives us a lot of information. Now, Marge, who is going to this same therapist for postpartum depression because she just had her 3rd baby, another boy, when all she's ever wanted is a little girl. She notices the walls are blue because it's just one more affront to her senses. Everything in her world is blue. So to her, the walls matter.
Okay, I'll give you one. Marv, he got the referral for this therapist from his rabbi down the road, comes in and he is nervous and he's not sure. He's never been to therapy before, sees the Brown certificate. Good. Ivy League. Good. I went to Ivy League. He's going to be smart.
Right.
That means he knows his stuff.
Right.
So yes, but all of that was the character.
Right. Let's say we have a woman that if we go back to another episode, we talked about a woman who found out her husband is cheating. She would notice that the therapist isn't wearing a wedding ring. So clearly she isn't married. So how can she possibly help me? That would be what she would notice.
Yeah.
So I think that those are examples of where we're using setting. The character, what they would notice, tells us so much about them.
Yes. I can give you an example from the classics is The House of Seven Gables. There's a scene where the rich man sits in the upholstered chair and the poor person sits in the high back, rigid chair. And so he's in the high back, uncomfortable, going to be judged chair where the other guy's leaning back in the comfortable, opulent setting. And so you use those kind of details.
Right.
That says a lot too. The person who sits behind the big desk and has a little tiny chair where the guest sits.
They're a power play.
Right. So those type of details. You could also do it, you want to make it work for your plot too. So,
ooh, tell us this, because see, I can do it.
A lot of times we will I do it. I mean, I do all these mistakes. I'm horrible with setting. We will randomly pick something like, oh, you know what? I think I'll have this in the woods. Well, why? Why are you having this scene? Pick scenes that will work the plot.
Now, see, I think I'm good at setting for character, but I've never thought, how do you use setting to move the plot along?
To set the mood for a scene, it's something like it'll reflect the same emotional action that's on the page. For example, if it's going to be a very sad scene, you may want to use having it be rainy or gray sky, because those tend to be the word's right out of my head, but
blue
archetypes.
depressing.
Those are archetypes that people trigger with sadness. Or you want to do the opposite because you really want it to be jarring. You want it to be a beautiful sunny day,
right? Like movies when they have
the dead dog
symphonies, beautiful symphonies playing while a battle is going on.
Exactly.
I love the juxtaposition of when I see that. So you're saying do that like they do in the movies,
right?
Do
or
that
have
in
it
the book.
mirror it. Like if you have the person standing at an ocean, contemplating suicide at the very beginning of your book, maybe at the end they're taking a walk on the beach or standing on a balcony overlooking the ocean. Bring it full circle. And use the setting to anchor both the beginning and the end.
Oh, that's good.
And then you use a juxtaposition, which is great. Like if it's can you imagine how scary Disney World would be if you knew there was a sniper someplace and you had to find him?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
That wasn't mine. That was somebody else came up
really?
with it. But
That's
it was in a lecture.
makes...
But can you imagine how scary that would be?
But what a great first line too. Who could not keep reading?
Well, or in that scene, if it's your climax where they have to go find the guy who's poised, was it Black Sunday where the guys, they know that it's going to happen at the Super Bowl. So you juxtapose, all this tension with all these people having a great time. Well,
what's Black Sunday?
Black Sunday is a book about them trying to blow up the Super Bowl.
Oh, fake or true?
No, it's fake.
Okay. Was it good?
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Okay.
It was in the 70s.
There.
It was in the 70s.
Okay.
A long time ago.
Huh. So how else? So we can use setting to help develop the characters. We can use it to move the plot along. I love the idea of using it to bring it full circle.
Right, and you can use it to reveal things about your character. For example, if your character is a very passionate person, put them in a room. The things you want to pick out are the things with the bright colors. The fiery red chair. Things that will stick in the reader's head as, again, triggers for certain emotions or archetypes. Red is red means passion, blue means calm, black means death. So you'd kind of want to use your setting and pick out the objects, one or two objects in the thing that would reflect the scene. So the person may come in and notice that she's there in her bright red dress on the gold settee with the
right
with a peacock in the back,
which is very different than a gingham covered love seat.
Exactly. She walks into her room, which is all white with no dirt, and the glass coffee table with no fingerprints.
Right. Probably not a mother.
What if she is a mother?
Even more interesting.
Right.
Though.
Then you're like,
right.
Really?
Now you feel bad for the kids.
Right. And, depending on your character, but if the character is another mother, she may be like, how did she do that?
Oh, right.
So again, I feel like I'm saying again, but they all the things we've talked about in the last few weeks, setting, starting the story, info dumping, so they all kind of work together to knowing exactly who your character is and then kind of mapping out your story to reflect, the setting should reflect your story, kind of mapping everything out, a lot of pre-writing.
Right. What if you're really good with character and you're just not that good with plot?
That would be me.
No.
Oh, well, that plotting is probably my weak point. So you kind of have to work a little extra hard at it, but yeah.
Can we use all these? Wow, I would never have said that your plot is. I've seen you with your charts and your graphs.
Yeah, because you work at it. You work at the stuff that you're
but that you're not good at. Okay, well, hopefully we're helping you here so that you can avoid making some of these mistakes. If you want to hear this episode again or share it with a friend, send them to the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. That's UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. You can find this podcast and the vodcast video on demand in case you want to watch us. Find this episode and all previous episodes on the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv, and please subscribe.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.